The simple pattern that predicts human behavior. At first, it looked like coincidence. Then it appeared again and again until ignoring it became impossible. To understand why human behavior follows a hidden pattern, we have to step away from personalities and emotions. For centuries, people believed choices were driven by free will alone, individual, unpredictable, and deeply personal. Yet when behavior was recorded at scale, something unexpected emerged. Large groups didn't act randomly. They followed curves, ratios, and repeating shapes. This mattered because modern society runs on prediction. Elections, markets, traffic, and technology all depend on anticipating what people will do next. The assumption was simple. Individuals are unpredictable, but crowds average out. What nobody expected was how precise those averages became. Early observers noticed the same distributions appearing in completely different settings. Crime rates followed familiar curves. Shopping habits clustered in predictable ranges. Even the timing of decisions repeated with eerie consistency. Different people, different cultures, same mathematical fingerprints. At first, these patterns were dismissed as artifacts of poor data. Surely human behavior was too complex to be reduced to numbers. But as datasets grew larger and cleaner, the pattern sharpened, the noise faded, the structure remained. What made this discovery unsettling was its simplicity. The equations involved were not complex. They didn't rely on deep psychological insight. They emerged naturally once enough behavior was measured. And once seen, they could not be unseen. The idea was no longer that math could describe human behavior. It was that human behavior had been quietly following mathematical rules all along. As researchers dug deeper, the pattern revealed something even more unsettling. It did not depend on intention. People could believe they were acting freely, yet the collective outcome still followed the same shape. Individual stories varied wildly, but the aggregate result barely changed. This forced a shift in perspective. The focus moved away from motives and toward constraints. Time, information, resources, and attention shaped decisions long before emotion entered the picture. When these constraints aligned, behavior snapped into predictable forms. The same patterns surfaced in unexpected places. The spread of ideas followed it. The rise and fall of trends abated. Even how long people waited before making a choice fit the same curve. Once enough data existed, prediction became disturbingly accurate. This did not mean people were machines. It meant systems were powerful. Social structures, incentives, and feedback loops quietly guided decisions. Change the environment and behavior shifted. Leave it untouched and the pattern returned. The most striking aspect was resilience. Attempts to disrupt the pattern often failed. Education campaigns, warnings, and incentives changed details, but the overall shape survived. The math absorbed human effort and smoothed it out. This raised an uncomfortable question. If behavior could be predicted so reliably, who would use that knowledge? And to what end? The pattern was no longer an academic curiosity. It was a tool, and like all tools, its impact depended on who held it. Once prediction crossed a certain threshold, the ethical tension became impossible to ignore. Knowing what people were likely to do tomorrow created the power to shape what they did today. Recommendation systems, pricing models, and political messaging began relying on the same underlying mathematics. What looked like convenience was often subtle guidance. Suggestions nudged behavior. Default steered choices. Small design decisions produced large shifts at scale. The pattern did not just predict actions, it amplified influence. This created a feedback loop. As systems learned from behavior, they began shaping in return. The data reflected choices, but the choices were increasingly shaped by the data. Over time, the pattern tightened. Variations shrank. Outliers were pulled back toward the average. The conflict deepened because the math itself was neutral. It did not care about intention or outcome. It optimized whatever goal was given. Engagement, profit, efficiency. The same equation could be used to help people make better decisions or quietly limit their options. Resistance proved difficult. Individuals could rebel, but collectives rarely did. The pattern absorbed defiance and returned to form. Even when people try to act unpredictably, their behavior clustered into new, equally predictable shapes. This was the emotional peak of the story. Humanity confronting a mirror that reflected not individuality, but regularity. The unsettling realization that freedom and predictability could coexist in the same system. The question was no longer whether behavior followed a pattern. It was whether that pattern would be used to serve people or control them. The resolution came with a subtle shift in thinking. The pattern did not erase free will. It revealed its boundaries. Within certain conditions, choices clustered. Outside them, creativity still flourished. Prediction described tendencies, not destinies. Understanding this changed how systems were designed. Instead of forcing behavior, some began shaping environments that expanded meaningful choice. Transparency weakened manipulation. Awareness restored agency. The same math that constrained behavior could also protect it. Today, these patterns quietly guide everything from city planning to digital platforms. They help reduce waste, improve safety, and allocate resources more efficiently. But they also demand responsibility, because predicting people is not the same as understanding them. The true lesson is not that humans are predictable. It is that systems are powerful. And when systems grow large enough, individual freedom depends on how those systems are built. Every curve tells a story, not about who we are alone, but about who we become together. And recognizing the pattern is a first step toward choosing how it shapes us. So what do you think? Are we repeating the same mistake again?